Podcast, a podcast offering discussions and tutorials about nerdy subjects for people who aren't necessarily nerdy themselves. With you today is myself, your nerdy tutor George, and with me today, Junior Weeb, my mom.
Junior Weeb!
Yes, remember. So, this is kind of a continuation from our one of our very first episodes on Japanese animation, where today we're discussing Japanese comics, or as they're colloquially called in Japan as well, manga.
Yeah, I'm real curious about this.
So I don't really want to go into the history of comics, because the history of like Japanese comics probably predates to about the 15 and 1600s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like they didn't exist in the way we kind of know of them now, or even kind of in the way like Charlie Brown kind of existed in a long period ago, or even like very early like Spider-Man and Captain America, Superman. Like they existed as kind of like funny pictures, as it were. So like the history of Japanese manga is really, really old in that particular sense. And I don't think it would add anything to the conversation in a lot of way.
Okay.
So instead, I kind of wanted to go about what more modern manga is kind of like instead.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about here. So if you remember back in our original episode about Japanese animation, a lot of Japanese animation is actually originally based on Japanese comics. And a lot of it and then if your series is popular enough as a manga, it can become an anime in a lot of cases. And so that's kind of the genesis of where a lot of manga comes from, or a lot of anime rather comes from, is either in manga format, which is which usually it's at least 100 chapters before they start going into it. Although I wish there was often more, but that's a completely different problem. Because what happens here is that a lot of the time when Japanese animation, they're able to do about 2 to 3 chapters in a single episode. And if you spend like a long-running shonen series, which can be sometimes upward of 400 or 500 chapters, you run into a problem real quickly where, like, after you do about maybe 100, chapters, that's maybe about 40 to 50 episodes, and you can get caught up real quickly in some cases, especially if your thing is really battle-focused or action-focused. Because you can kind of condense a lot of that action into a much smaller format in an
shorter
animation.
time frame.
Yeah, like there is one of my favorite shows, Bleach. It has a giant sword fight that in the manga lasts for about 4 to 5 weeks, and when you consider that this is a weekly publication, that's an entire month. In the show, though, it lasted for about an episode and a half.
Oh.
So, like, what was this really kind of super drawn-out sort of fight was kind of condensed because all the action kind of took place in the middle there. So, and that's just an example here. So,
what would be some of your favorite anime that came from manga?
Some of those are going to be your review topics, so I don't want to talk about them necessarily.
Okay. All right.
But to know what kind of modern manga is to kind of know kind of where I come up with the term the kitchen sink syndrome.
Okay.
And what I call the kitchen sink syndrome is basically somebody trying whatever they can, including the kitchen sink. Japan is notorious for trying any and everything. It's why it's why you always hear stuff about weird stuff in Japan. This notion that, like, this show's about this dude with octopus arms, with tentacles everywhere. It's like, that came from Japan because somebody tried something and a lot of people actually liked it. So they kept going with it. Versus where here in America, like, if you wanted to do something, you'd have to get, like, a panel together to decide whether this is of interest or not. But that's not fair because people don't know if they're interested in it or not until they kind of actually experience it.
Okay.
That's why you have pilots.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, TV shows do pilots and it has to see if it's even worth going into it because you don't know if it's actually going to be popular or not, or if it's even worth, trying to do it all. And so But even then, they're super focused tests. They're laser focused here. Like, Japanese manga is not really quite like that in a lot of cases. I mean, like, yes, there's a group of people that kind of like will decide whether your thing gets through or not, and there's editors involved in it, but for the most part, like, if they see something that's kind of interesting to them, they'll put it in their book and give it a shot. So, to talk about manga, though, is to talk about a couple different genre of manga here. So, and they're not that dissimilar from Japanese animation at all. So you get to, like, shonen, which is for kind of, like, young boys and young men. This is kind of your typical sort of Japanese animation, like Naruto, One Piece, basically anywhere in which kind of, like, boys are kind of fighting with one another, or there's kind of a fight sort of aspect going on, or if it's aimed toward boys. A lot of that is also...
okay, so something like Dragon Ball Z?
Yes, was very much... It was one of the very first... One of the original Shonen Jump things on there in the 80s. Was
that a manga?
Very popular manga that started off as.
Oh, very, very interesting. Okay.
Actually, to speak of Dragon Ball Z, so there's a thing that happens where the main character originally has black hair, and then it suddenly turns to gold hair, and he's a race of aliens called a Saiyan, which are very indistinguishable from humans, except that they're, like, really strong and can fire, like, energy out of their hands. And if he gets angry enough and builds up enough power, he'll get even stronger, to the point in which his hair grows very spiky and starts spiking upward instead of outward, and goes golden in color. Originally, you gotta remember that Japanese comics are all in black and white for the most part.
Oh, they're not colored.
Well, some things are colored. The majority of it is not colored.
Okay.
So, the original reason for them going this Super Saiyan route is that the artist Akira Toriyama didn't want to keep using so much black ink on his art, because he would literally have to soak the page in so much black ink to get everyone's hair black.
Yeah.
And back in this point in the time, he wasn't really distinguishing, lines in the hair, because black hair doesn't usually get distinguished a whole lot.
Uh-huh.
And so it was just this clump of black hair, and a lot of his characters had black hair.
It's a lot of dark on a page.
Yeah. And at the same time as well, oftentimes you'd either run out of ink, which was more expensive, or sometimes ink would bleed through pages when printing sometimes. So they came up with the idea that a superpower was their hair went white in the comics, but was translated to kind of a golden color. Okay. And this you'll see quite a bit, where some characters when you look at them, they either have like a black hair or a white hair sort of thing.
Okay.
And then when you see them in the color art, you'll see that they have either gold hair, pink hair, like a light blue sort of hair, or like kind of like a seafoam green kind of color. And then the people who have dark hair maybe have brown hair, or purple hair, red hair, stuff like that. They're not quite...
Okay.
They're not quite, just one way or another.
Okay.
And so that's where you will see kind of some colored images at. A lot of the time, the colored images are for covers of their volumes of their stuff, which they call tankobons.
Okay.
Or for the cover pages of the magazines that they have.
Okay.
So, most Japanese animation that you'll find out there is in one of two different formats. I'm completely sidetracking myself, so sorry. So let's go back to the types of mangas that there are.
Okay.
So shonen is kind of like the premier sort of style of manga here. It's usually meant for young boys, not young boys, but like adolescent boys, teenagers, and young men.
Yeah.
You get to shoujo manga. This is more kind of girly manga that's aimed more toward girls. Now, this is often where you'll get magical girl series, a lot more romance-heavy series. And again, all those are aimed...
Sailor Moon,
very much originally a shoujo series. And also a magical girl series as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's kind of that's kind of the venue you'll see for that. You have Kodomo, which is like very young children. like 5, 6, 7 year olds starting to read, like like your early kind of like Berenstein Bear kind of book sort of things.
Oh,
If that makes sense.
okay.
There's comics for them too.
Okay.
And then they even have stuff for adults as well. And when I say adult, I don't mean like XXX rated. I mean more mature audiences.
Okay.
This is this is a movie being an R-rated movie when really it's just about like a very touchy topic.
PG-13. But
Yeah. PG-13 in that sense. And you have Seinen, which is kind of more, which kind of encompasses all of it really, but like it's meant for mature adults, mostly males. And you have Josei, which is more themed toward women, older women.
Really?
Yes, so they do have stuff like that. And typically what you'll find of like Seinen and Josei kind of stuff, where there's not really an enemy and they're more dealing about their own kind of hang-ups or their own kind of like, or they're often about topics that like really wouldn't be appropriate to like young adults. Not necessarily the most popular sort of stuff that you might have out there. Okay. So something kind of about like nuclear war in some cases is generally not something you generally talk a lot about in shonen manga. And even when there are wars, they don't really show like the travesty of war and all the negative aspects of war. It's more like war is a background setting, but not like the actual like repercussions of war, if you will. So a lot of like, but even then, like sometimes it's about complex sort of emotions, like sometimes it might. I'm trying to think of a good seinen manga here.
Well, I would imagine manga geared towards adult women would be drama manga of sorts.
They can be a little bit more drama-y. There's a good one I know of where it's 3 people that have this weird triangle relationship with each other, and each of them have very different sort of gender norms about each other.
Oh.
So, like, one of them is a woman who has kind of always been a little bit of a tomboy, but, like, when she got to college, she just started dressing like a boy, like a guy, and people kind of forget that she's actually a girl. But then when she goes home, she secretly goes home, puts on her old school uniform, and kind of, masturbates to it.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And then you have another person who is very cute, but is very, very cute and very petite looking, who, while she goes to college, in her nighttime, she dresses up in her school uniform and hooks up with older men so that she can make money off of them, thinking that they're getting on with a younger woman.
Okay.
And then there's a third person here who's actually a guy who cross-dresses as a woman because he thinks that's how he relates with other people.
Okay.
So, again, very complex emotions and feelings.
Does he also dress as a schoolgirl?
At one point, yes.
Okay. Because that seemed to be the running thread there.
It's a little bit of a thread in that, yeah.
So are there romance mangas?
Yes. Those kind of can fall on a number of different fields. Again, like, if you're in kind of a shoujo kind of area, there's a very innocent sort of love sort of thing that happens in a lot of cases. It's very much of a sort of, I really like you, but I don't know how quite to express my emotions, how much
sort
I
of
like you.
Tuxedo Mask and...
Kind of like that. It's kind of hard to explain. It's very much kind of like I love you so much that I can't really quite understand, can't quite express how much I love you, but also just kind of like, it's hard to explain because I don't read a lot of those. I don't find those of interest. The alternative to that might be in a shonen manga, which would be what they call a harem manga. And a harem is usually where you have one guy with multiple girls that either he's trying to have a relationship with one of these girls somewhere along the way, or all of them are trying to all the females are trying to have a relationship with him.
Sort of a bachelor manga.
Yeah, very much kind of like a bachelor or bachelorettes kind of thing. Because there's also reverse harems where it's the guy's going after the girl, and the girl like trying to like just survive against all these really cute guys trying to get with them.
Manga in Paradise.
Yes. So
there we go.
There's a lot of comedy manga as well. Keep in mind, Japanese for comedy love their puns. So a lot of the times, like two words that sound kind of similar will get kind of used will get used together in a lot of cases, and that's funny to the Japanese.
Okay.
That
would be hard for somebody who isn't fluent in Japanese
to understand. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it'd be in a lot of the same way in saying that, like, oh God, I had a pun here a lot too long ago. Or my version of what is literal humor. Like, I love literal humor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, but that's popular there, too. Like, you mentioned something and you're actually talking about something else.
Yeah.
So that's popular in Japan as well. There's even certain types of comic styles. So you have, obviously, comedy, you have fantasy, you have sci-fi, modern, detective, noir. You have just this broad gambit of comics in Japan.
Okay.
And you have about 1 billion other magazines that go along with that. And now when I say magazines, I don't mean like Time magazine necessarily. So Japanese comics and manga are usually in about 20 to 25 pages usually, sometimes more. If you're a weekly series. In weekly, I mean like literally your chapters come out every week.
Now, I assume there are special stores where you can buy these? Or you subscribe to them, or?
You basically go down to 7-Eleven and buy them on can buy them on any given weekly basis. Some come out on Tuesdays, some come out on Thursdays. Like there's a weekly shonen. There's like Shonen Monday was the thing at one point, and weekly shonen and weekend shonen was the deal as well. There's some that come out once a month, and if it's once a month, it might be anywhere from 40 to 45 pages, sometimes a little bit more.
That's a lot of drawing on a weekly basis. I mean, that's a lot of... That's got to be more than one artist working on the comic.
So I will get into kind of the process here in a little bit, but I wanted to describe kind of the nature of it here. So the magazines are basically how you get your comic out there. The lone exception to that is what they call a fan comic or a doshenshi. And that can kind of be sold anywhere under the table almost.
Because it's fanfic.
It's fanfic and fan made in a lot of cases. In some cases, it's using two different characters from a series and putting them together, or adding more to a story that was already concluded, or is going in a different direction, or telling your own story with it. It'd be, as an example, it'd be like Lord of the Rings if you decided to have like a story about Jaime and Cersei getting back together and going off and having an adventure alone.
Okay.
Like kind of like that almost in some cases. The doshenshi are actually very popular in Japan because unlike here in America, where a lot of where you can't, if you were to do another comic and try to sell it here, like if I were to make like an Iron Man comic and try to sell it to people, Marvel, Disney would be on top of me like nobody's business with copyright infringement.
Right.
In Japan, Japanese artists consider that if you make a doshinshi or you make a fan work off of what I put effort into make for you, they consider that a huge sign of respect. Because
so sort of like mimicry is the biggest compliment.
Yeah, kind of like sincerest form of flattery. It's like
you
thought what I was doing was so cool that you went and made something of it. You made something else on it, and that inspired you to do it, or inspired you to dress up like this character. In some cases, when I was in 2007, 2008, would have been still in LA. I went to a convention that's called Anime Expo. It's one of the largest Japanese animation conventions, if not the largest here in North America. When I was going there, it was in the Anaheim Convention Center. Now it's in the LA Convention Center. It was about twice the size.
Oh wow!
And when it was in the Anaheim Convention Center, it was about 45,000 people over the course of 3 to 4 days. Now it's anywhere about 70 to 75,000 people over the course of the 3 to 4 days at the LA Convention Center. It's just massive, like on a completely different level. That's hard to express. But when we were in LA, I was dressing up as a character from one of my favorite comics, Bleach, which is about which is a story that's kind of hard to explain. It's about Grim Reapers that look kind of like vaguely like samurai without all the armor, that go out and put to rest people that are dead. It either send them to the afterlife, or if they've been around for too long as dead people, they turn into bad guys at one point, and you have to defeat the bad guys.
Okay.
I was dressing up as one of the characters, and I happened to be with a bunch of other people that were also dressing up as other characters because the show's got like 1 billion characters in it.
Okay.
And we met one of the editors who was working on that manga, and we took a bunch of pictures with him, and like apparently like we later heard that like when the editor got back to Japan, the guy who drew it was like so impressed that everybody in America was so enamored by his stuff that he was doing in Japan.
Oh wow!
Because it was on his blog. He later said that like my editor has gone to America to the conventions, and I've been to conventions in America. It's amazing to see how much you guys love what I do, when I barely have a chance to take a rest to enjoy it as well.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah. So you have these different mangas, but magazines, and they usually will consider, like, as an example here, the one I'm going to use the most example for is Shonen Jump, because it's the one that's actually most well documented at one point here. Shonen Jump is a long-running Japanese magazine series. It's part of the Jump series of stuff. They have multiple different manga volumes, magazines that they have. They have a once-monthly sort of thing that they do. They have a weekly one that they do. They have a second other one that they do here as well.
So is it like a brand?
Yes.
Okay.
Very much a brand. It's even here in the West, too.
Okay.
So what you'll get is a book about the size of our mixer here.
So about 2.5 inches.
2 to 3 inches thick. And it's full of probably about 200 to 300 pages worth of comics in it. Each one about 20 pages long, and along with advertisements as well.
Okay.
And typically in that book you'll have anywhere from about 16 to 17 ongoing series. And then you'll have about 1 or 2 specialty chapters in there. And the specialty chapters are either like test runs of something that somebody wants, because they want to see if this will be a good a weekly series to do based on people's opinions of it. Or sometimes there are anthologies where sometimes you'll have like an artist who's been with Shonen Jump before is doing something special in it. You might have like, oh, this is a final this is like an epilogue to a former something that's ended recently, or
to tell you what happened afterwards.
After the final bit here, like weeks, months later, or sometimes like this was such a great series that here is a short run of something like Kuroko no Basket. When it finished, like 6 months later in the story, had like another basketball tournament that happened that lasted for another 8 chapters. And which was a lot of fun to read, so they just continue to put those out every other week.
And that's that series that I watched.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, which you're going to read about too.
Okay.
You're actually going to read the scenes that you saw in the anime.
Oh, really? That'll be fun.
Yes.
Okay.
As a test to see if you remember how much you remember and how stuff is a little bit different here and there.
Okay.
And I chose that because I initially wanted to choose all the same manga that you originally did as anime.
Uh-huh.
But Senpai Doesn't Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai was never a manga. It was a light novel.
I thoroughly enjoyed that.
And Gundam doesn't have a manga equivalent to it. But
okay.
Kuroko no Basket had a manga to it. Sailor Moon obviously had a very long-running manga for it.
Yeah.
And Promised Neverland, but I thought about it, and I know you didn't like Promised Neverland, so I didn't want to recommend...
Promised Neverland was Soylent Green.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. I didn't want to put that one in there because I know you didn't have a good reaction to it. But I figured if I had at least one,
Death
that would
of
be
small
good.
children, not my thing.
I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. No, I mean, I was actually glad you steered me that way. Your selection was marvelous because I got a little slice of everything, but one slice of that one is enough.
Now, that one you can get pretty close to being called a seinen series at a certain point. But it's still considered a shonen series because technically the children are battling with mother.
Well, they're also battling with monsters. I mean,
yeah, but not directly though. They're battling with
true.
mother at the end of the day.
Okay.
So that's why it's more of a shonen series. Some seinen series and josei series can be kind of still like that as well.
Yeah, mom's telling people that they're getting adopted when they're getting fed to monsters. Yeah.
Again, but would you ever see a show like that here in America?
Oh gosh, no, you couldn't.
No, you'll never see a show like that in America, so you'll never know. And how would you ever know if that would be interesting or not?
Well, I think so. I'm curious to see if manga strikes me the same way. But one of the things that I really enjoyed, with the earlier things that I watched, the anime, was it strikes me as very candid. And the conversation struck me as being very candid and somewhat intimate and candid in a way that I don't necessarily think that
you typically see from even like more American stuff. Like
yeah.
a lot of I think part of the problem with American television, and this is just my opinion of it, is that it's dominated by two different types of formats. You have your in the evenings.
Yeah.
You have your sitcoms, which are meant to give you a bunch of laughs in a short half hour, not to necessarily continue or propagate a story at all. And then you have your drama series, which are either very dramatic and attempting to really make you like invested in the story, but sometimes not really in the characters at all.
Well, and not into characters. They're into some sort of event that's going to happen.
Or they're into this narrated story, but not necessarily about the character.
In a hospital, in a law firm, in a whatever.
In a hotel.
Yeah.
It's all about this overarching story that's happening, and these other characters are kind of just moving along through it.
Yeah,
but they're not about the characters at all. They're about these events all happening.
Well, and I guess my observation would be they're about confrontation in some form or another. And what I liked about the anime was that it explored relationships between people and let people have conversations that weren't about confrontation. They were more about how they felt.
Yes.
And so I appreciated that. So I'm curious as to whether manga strikes me the same way.
I think it will. I chose some interesting stuff, I think. So, and I'll tell you about what I chose here in a little bit. But if we're talking about the manga magazines, let's talk about how manga is actually made. So, you're not wrong that it's not one person drawing it the entire time. It's actually usually a small team of people, but there's usually one person that's the main artist.
Okay.
And so you'll have one main artist. They're usually known as a mangaka. And what you'll have is assistants. And now, depending on what kind of manga you have, if you have a lot of things going on in the background or a lot of interesting sort of scenes or things like that, you might have anywhere from 3 to 4 assistants. Not all week. Usually maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And those assistants might actually be working on other people's manga as well in order to keep their job. So you'll have a person that does like background sort of stuff, and then you'll have another person that does additional characters in the backgrounds or like books and objects like that. If you're working on if you're working on something that has a very detailed sort of thing, like motorcycles, for example, maybe you don't draw motorcycles very well, but you find an assistant who does draw motorcycles very well.
You could have so you could have somebody who just did battle scenes.
Well, not necessarily battle scenes, but they might do all the background stuff for battle scenes.
Okay.
Like they might do like they may be really good at creating craters in the ground and destroyed backgrounds. Or you might have somebody if you're just sitting set in a downtown, maybe they're really good at making the background buildings look like they're real, like you're in perspective for some side. Like if you're like in a kind of a sideways angle, maybe they're the ones that help with the parallax of the buildings.
Okay.
To make the buildings look quite right. Or
great use of that word.
I tried. I got a big vocabulary, I'm told.
Oh. Parallax is a very underused word. We use it in architecture all the time.
Yeah. If you're in a show that has a lot of forests and trees and animals, you might have a person that just does those trees and those animals because that's kind of the necessity for you.
Well, I mean, we hire bugs and bunny people all the time. It's literally what we call them.
Yeah, and again, you might have specialty sort of people that would help you on that. And a lot of these people, though, a lot of these assistants, some of them are professional assistants. They want to be full-time assistants they're full-time assistants, and they don't really want to make their own stuff. They want to help make whatever they have great. And you might, in all honesty, have an assistant that's with you for years. Very recently here, you had a very long-running series that went for 15 years of weekly comics. Over 700 chapters was a series called Naruto.
I've heard of Naruto.
And you've heard of Naruto. Now, about a year later, a sequel to that followed up called Boruto, which is the son of Naruto. And it's actually done by one of the assistants of the guy who did Naruto. So it's the assistant now doing the follow-up to it.
I mean, he would know the characters, would know the style.
He would know the characters. He's got kind of his own kind of little twist on the characters, which some people like and some people don't. I'm of the opinion that it's fine.
Okay.
It's not what I want, but it's perfectly serviceable and fine.
Well, Gone with the Wind had a number of sequels, and nobody could come into agreement as to what the sequels should be.
Well, and again, it's very much as if it's as if they did The Matrix as an example, and then a completely different studio did the follow-up movie for it and had different actors in it. Who's to say who was really the better actor and who wasn't the better actor, and where is your version lying in where somebody else's version doesn't? Yeah. So that's an example here. So you might have multiple editors. Now, what you initially do though is when you want to draw a comic, you have an editor that you're assigned when you're doing comics, and this editor doesn't help you necessarily write the story, but helps you point you in the direction of the story. They help you kind of come up with ideas and help you.
Sort of a storyboard.
Kind of a storyboard, kind of a sounding board, even too. This is where I want to go, and the editor might tell you, this isn't really that interesting, though, by comparison.
Okay.
Or they might ask you, in 3 weeks you're going to be having cover art pages at the beginning of the comic, or colored pages. You might want to aim whatever you're going to do for those colored pages in the story.
Okay.
To have it kind of link.
So you land there, yeah.
So you land it better. Or they might tell you, this is dragging on a little too long, and people don't like this character. Are you doing something with it, or is it character we can kill and get rid of, or not need anymore?
Becomes expendable.
Yeah, and your editor's really there to kind of help guide you on a little bit. They're trying to find a great example of it here. They're like lines in the road when you're driving. Okay. You don't have to necessarily follow them, but following them generally tends to get you to the places you want to get to with the least destructive effort.
I've been in countries where they don't follow them at all.
Well, I know some countries don't even have them.
This is true, too.
Yeah, so. And oddly enough, everyone just gets by perfectly fine without the lines in the road.
Try to cross the street.
Yeah, that too. So again, you have an editor. Usually what you'll give to the editor is what you call a name. And don't ask me why they call it a name in Japan. It's just kind of the way it is. Basically what it is, it's if you've ever watched storyboarding for movies and animation, you'll know that the drawings are kind of super quick and very basic almost, and it's kind of how you're just kind of figuring out where everything goes and the outline for everything. You'll give one of these to your editor, and your editor will kind of look at it and give it a once-over and be like, yay or nay on it. And then he'll give it back to you with either notes and revisions on it, or we should do something else instead. So you're not always giving him a final product, because obviously to do the final product would take a while.
Yeah.
So you
don't want to have to redo it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it's going to be very hard to do it, because while you might do the initial stuff in pencil, then you've got to ink it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ink is not done digitally at all. It's all done...
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's very few artists that do stuff digitally right now, because a lot of it's all about the pen and the paper and having that correct stroke work and everything. And there's very few... There are new artists that are getting into the digital aspect of it, but a lot of it's still done by hand, photocopied with really nice photocopiers, and given directly to the guy, the editor, to literally in a little manila folder take it to be taken to the print shop.
That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah. There's some editors, again, that just kind of run around doing this all the time. Yeah. So you get your name decided, and then you'll go through the process of drawing it. And depending on what your flow and your schedule is, and when you have your assistants, you're basically working on the manga 6 to 7 days a week.
Wow. But it would require that.
It would. And again, and I don't mean like 6 to 7 days for like an 8-hour job. I mean in a lot of cases like 10 to 12 hours. Like there's a lot of artists in Japan, and especially in the anime industry, where they work really, really hard and they almost never take a break because they're on a weekly series. Because the concern is that if you take a break at all, somebody's got to replace you, and that thing might be more interesting than whatever you had beforehand. So when I say that, like, the guy from Naruto did 700 plus chapters, he did it on a weekly basis, with the exception that he might get a week's break here or there. But usually, even then, during that week break, he was still working for the most part on more stuff, or occasionally, in some cases,
future storylines.
Either future storylines. In some cases, what some animators might do is that if you are the guy from Naruto, you might be asked to make new characters for a video game coming out, or the anime that's going on. You might be asked to sit in on production meetings for it.
Okay.
You know, like there's a lot of, if you get more popular, you might just be doing the one thing and animating and drawing it, but you might be asked to do additional stuff for it, so that way you can get more popular. And then keep in mind, these people don't own the characters at the end of the day either. The production company owns them at the end of the day.
So like back in the day when Capitol Records owned Beatles music.
Or as it is kind of right now, like if you go back to like Stan Lee is a great example here. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created a lot of what the modern superhero and Avengers were. Like they did create Thor, Iron Man, the Hulk. They created a lot of these characters like Wolverine and everything, but like they don't own those characters.
Right.
Marvel owns those characters. Like famously, the guy who came up with Wolverine for one comic to fight the Hulk. And it was later retconned that Wolverine was actually a mutant who was an X-Men. Years later. But again, I mean, like, or not necessarily years later, but like a couple months later. And that's an example here that like he made the character, but he didn't get a dime off of it. Same thing with like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and a lot of these early creators here. They made a lot of these comics without ever actually, they basically got paid for the work that they did, but never got any royalties off of what they did. And my only saving grace here is at least Stan Lee got to be in the movies, and maybe that was like a fun little tribute. Stan Lee always gave the impression that he was like a really kind of cool cat at the end of the day. Like he was always very nice and sweet, and I think he would have looked at the fact that he got to be in these movies as like, look at me, everything I've ever made is in movies, and I'm in movies.
Yeah,
I would love to think that was the impression. Like if I created like a cool thing, like I want to be in it in some way, shape. I don't care if I'm just a background character. Like if you, as an example here, there's a movie called Hellboy, originally starting as a comic.
I know of Hellboy.
Yeah,
have not seen it. Played
brilliantly by Ron Perlman. I think it's one of his best roles he's ever done because he just matches it so perfect.
He played the Beast once too.
He did.
Yeah.
But in the movie, there's a scene where both the guy who created the comic book Hellboy and the director for the movie are background characters in it.
That's cute.
Again, if I make something that's really that cool, I want to be just some tiny background character.
Yeah.
And a lot of Marvel movies, again, if we go back to Spider-Man, the latest Spider-Man movie, do you remember one of the guys, that was bald, that was doing all the computer programming for the holograms?
Yeah.
If you go back, he goes back to when they were at the first Iron Man movie. That's a producer.
Oh, wow.
He was a producer on the first he was one of the producers for the first Iron Man movie.
Oh, very cool.
And he's obviously been with the Marvel Studios for a while here now doing other stuff, but he was originally a producer on that first movie.
That's pretty cool.
And he literally went into the back, he shaved part of his head off to get kind of this like bald kind of look on there, to play one of the scientists and engineers working on
one of the resentful people who turns against, yes.
Yeah. So there's a great example. Again, like if I could do it, I would do it. But but if you go back to like these mangaka and even the animators, like they might hide themselves somewhere in there, maybe, but like they really live and breathe this comic for years. A lot of them, like when the guy who did Naruto finally stopped Naruto, like they asked us, like, okay, well, what are you gonna do right now? It's like, I'm gonna take a nap.
Yeah, I bet.
I've never taken a nap before. I want to see what it's like. And a lot of these people have kids and wives and families that they routinely maybe only get a couple hours with every single day because this work. And I feel really, one part of me feels like really bad about it, but the other hand, it's like, dude, you made like this really, really cool thing. I can't not say how cool this is, but I feel bad that you've kind of missed out on some of your own family's life to entertain me.
Yeah.
So, for everything that comes out from Japan, American people love it to death.
Well, and it's my understanding that the French are very into it as well.
Oh, yeah. French are very... Everywhere around the world...
More so than the United States.
I don't know about that necessarily.
Oh, okay.
But there is such a thing known as... in Japanese animation, there's people who literally will watch the show, pause it every 5 seconds to write down what they're literally saying, and translate it for us. In animation terms, that's known as fan subbing.
Mm-hmm.
In manga form, it's known as scanlations, or scanlations, essentially. Because you're scanning it in the original Japanese, and then you're translating it.
That's cute. Okay.
It's some people, what they'll literally do is they'll get the books from Japan. They'll buy the big magazines. They'll literally cut the spine off. And then photocopy all the pages, and then put them online for people to go and scan and to go and translate.
That's dedication.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of scanning.
Yeah, but again, I mean, from their point of view, like they're scanning it, and they have all the chapters and everything on their computer. They have all the pages on their computer, so they don't really need the book anymore. And they've got a nice high-end scanner to do it, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then they're producing it for the rest of the world to go in to translate. And people are mad about translating Japanese comics. There's entire groups of people that to do it. Like, they'll clean up. So again, like the paper's kind of like a newspaper sort of.
Yeah, it's a thinner paper.
It's a thinner paper. It's often kind of grayish and recycled in a lot of cases. So you'll get people who actually clean up the pages, so they're just in pure black and white, and they'll flesh out some of the tones as well. They'll also will get the dialogue boxes, and if there's like, sometimes you might have like, if you remember like Adam West Batman, you'd have like pow, bang, like pop-ups that happen.
Yeah.
Some Japanese animation will have like the words that kind of scroll across to kind of emphasize the noise that's supposed to be happening. They'll art that out and like put in like English stuff in there sometimes. Well, they'll art out all the Japanese text and they'll replace it with English text. It's It's where the typeface known as Comic Sans really gets most usage out of.
Oh, that's cute.
So because it's Comic Sans, and that's where it gets a lot of use in Japanese manga.
It's actually pretty cool.
Yes,
it's the font I like.
It's a nice font.
Yeah.
It's often considered a very childish font. You can't use it for work, unfortunately.
Yeah, you can't, but
if you did like cartoons or you did like artsy sort of stuff, you could theoretically use it. But even then, it's not very professional. So, I think we can talk about some of the stuff I got for you here today.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, so I had a couple of follow-up questions, though,
sure.
to what you were saying. And one of them is, to me, there was a heyday of American comics. There's probably the 40s, 50s. It was a cheap form of entertainment at a time before TV.
Yes.
And does Japanese parallel that, or?
It kind of does. There was starting in the early 2000s, so 1998, 1999, or 97, I can't remember when One Piece starts. Japan, Shonen Jump had what they called the Big Three. Mm-hmm. And the Big Three were Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece. They were the hottest manga that were in the book. They always were at the top, top in the rankings. So this is what's interesting about Shonen Jump, is that they rank their anime based off of opinions from the people.
Okay.
So what they'll do is that at the end of when you have a book here, you'll have probably again like 15, 16, 17, maybe even 20 some odd titles in there. Uh-huh. The ones that do continually the worst will get replaced with new stuff. So they're always looking for new stuff.
Okay.
And the way they figure that out is that there's a comment card in the back, and they give you 3 choices of your favorite manga that week, and then you mail it back to them. And as a random sampling, they'll take 150 of the samplings, and that'll be their first preliminary sort of seeing who did how well. Mm-hmm. And then they'll rank the manga based off of which ones were mentioned the most. And then they'll do another one with about randomly 500 some odd sampling here, because again they'll get hundreds and hundreds of samplings, but they'll only use like randomly 500. Usually, sometimes it's just 500 or so.
Okay.
And based off of those surveys, we'll decide whether your comic is popular or not. And your comic and the placement of the book might also depend. So if you're like buried kind of in the back, you may not be a very popular comic.
So you're not following 2.5 Men? You're not following 2.5 Men?
No.
That was always sort of the lead-in for something they wanted to be popular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're not. Yes, you may not be following 2.5 Men, and you might not have the prime 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock spot here at all.
You're at that awful 10 o'clock spot.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, like, that's an example here. Sometimes some people can pick up on that a little bit. And if it's in the back of if it's in the back of the magazine, there's some people in Shonen Jump at least will know. Ooh, this may not be doing very well. So this might get canceled soon. And oftentimes when it gets canceled, it's not like an immediate sort of, okay, and you're done. But they do kind of give you, okay, you've got 3 to 4 chapters now to wrap up your...
I was going to ask, because you don't want to leave it uncompleted.
Some end up do.
I mean, do the books... So they come out in these series. I'm assuming they don't stand alone.
So typically what will happen here is that when they're inside the magazine, after you get a certain number of chapters, you'll have Takabanu come out, and that's a volume of it. And that'll go on sale, and that's additional revenue that you might receive because of it. And then a lot of artists get a lot of their money from the Takabon sales. So if you have a very popular manga that comes out, the sales of the books is a big kind of indication of how popular you are, too.
Okay.
So you might get a run of maybe like 200 or 300, copies, but if you're very popular thing, you might get a run of like maybe 700 or 800 some odd stuff, and you might get repeat sort of people like, we need to do another printing of this book.
Okay.
Because it's really popular. Because remember, like in a pre-digital era, these comics weren't saved in digital format. So unless you were keeping the big giant books, or buying the big giant magazine volumes, you were having to buy the little volumes in order to be able to read it, or to be able to be continuous with it and keep it for your own record, which was a very popular thing to do. But you might also have, but now in a slightly more digital age, a lot of these comics are now coming out digitally with subscription services and things like that let you read it kind of whenever you want and keep hold of it.
Okay.
So long as you're...
I mean, that makes it's a subscription.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, given the current day and age.
kind of the way it's going here now.
Yeah.
One of the websites you will go to is going to be the Viz.com, which is the Japanese arm of Jump Comics in Japan. Not necessarily the one-to-one translation, but a lot of their stuff comes from Jump, and I think Jump actually just flat out bought them at one point.
Okay.
But you'll actually go read a lot of stuff from there.
Okay.
Here's an interesting misnomer that you'll see when you're reading the Japanese comics. You read from left. If you don't, in America, we read from left to right.
Right.
In Japan, you read from right to left.
Oh, so I'm going to be turning the page and...
You're actually going to go to... You're always going to want to go from like the top... In American comics, what you do is you would start from the left-hand corner and kind of move yourself across.
Right.
You know, you might go to the one to the left and then to the right back down and then back to the centerpiece and back down. In Japan, you're going to start from the right. So you'll start in the right-hand corner and kind of work your way around like you would a traditional comic page. But because you got to remember, like, Japanese language, like, writing is from the right to the left.
Right.
And usually scrolls downward.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually when we were taking the classes, that was what was difficult for me.
Yeah. So, like, you might, so for us, we typically would read a word, like, from letter to letter from the left to the right. But in Japanese, you would read it from the right to the left. And often you might also read it from, you would probably actually... Nowadays, which in Japan is what I found, is you actually read it from left to right. But typically, their style of writing used to be from up to down. So you would start from so a lot of their pages would be like a grid sort of piece of paper with just lines down it for boxes, and we'd write the characters that you were trying to write as you would go down.
Oh, okay.
So
right, that of sorts makes sense.
Yeah, and again, it would make perfect sense if your language is typically from top to bottom.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot more Western kind of audiences, now it goes from right to left if it's being horizontal, and then if it's vertical, it goes up to down. Okay. Not unlike our modern writing style.
Okay.
That's a bit of a misnomer. The other one I'm going to have in here for is called a 4-comma or a yon-comma, the 4-panel comic. These are popular in non-anime magazines. So you might have... there's a series of magazines called New Type in Japan. That generally will always have at least one manga in there that's running some sort of like short run series. That's usually about 30 pages long, usually like 6-7 volumes of something. New Type is where you get a lot of the cool anime news from. It's a very colorful sort of book. I have a lot of them because they're just great art piece books that have a lot of cool promotional images and cool kind of backgrounds and designs for them. But what you might have in a book, and not even that, you might have just like a fashion magazine or a fashion book might have what they call a 4-comma comic, which is a comic that's basically a short comic in about 4 panels. And usually 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Occasionally they might be in a square, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Usually I've always seen them in a vertical fashion. So 1 at the top, 2 in the second, 3 in the 3, and then 4. Okay. And they're all going vertically down. And they always tell often what they'll do is you might have several of those of the same series in the same book. Okay. They're all kind of telling a short story along the way, or elements of the story.
Okay.
With the end of everyone's having like a punchline of some sort of joke at the end of it.
Okay.
So
do they tend to be humorous then?
The 4 commas generally are more of the humorous type. They're more of a gag style for the most part. I've never really seen a 4-comma comic that's really a
action or a...
Well, not necessarily an action, because it's hard to do a lot of action when you can't use the entire page in a lot of ways to do what you want with it.
Yeah.
I've never really seen any serious with it. I've always seen it for like more humorous stuff.
Okay.
Another
kind of like what used to be in the funny papers?
Very much so.
Okay. So got
it. It almost probably exactly how you would think like a vertical comic in the newspaper would be.
Okay.
Another style here is actually becoming slightly more popular is actually online comics in Japan, especially.
Okay.
There's a very popular show called One Punch Man, which originally started as a web comic. And the artist was known as, he called himself One, who had a really, like, ugly drawing style. But his webcomic was actually very popular because the story itself was actually very interesting. It's basically a guy who wants to be a superhero and dresses up like a superhero and everything. He has the cape, has a uniform and everything. But he beats everything up in one punch.
Too strong?
He's way too strong.
Okay.
Like, he can dodge and move around really easily. Like, he's not
agile.
He's super agile, practically indestructible. Like, but like he's also very kind of like, how do I describe it? Meandering is not the best way to describe it, but like he's very boring.
Okay.
He always has this kind of dead kind of pan look on his face. He always ends up accidentally finding himself in these kind of situations. He's never trying to be a hero. He's trying to literally be a hero, but he ends up accidentally being a hero in most cases. Like, I think at one point here, like, you walk through somewhere of a mutated, like, fly or mosquito was attacking another person about to kill this other person. He kind of just walks by and just kind of swats it away like it was nothing, and went and helped this other guy. Oh, wait, hey man, you're on the floor. Let me help you up here, man. You just beat that other person. I did what now? Which, and again, it's to him, like, he's never been able to find another person to fight that he can't beat with one punch or one attack.
Yeah.
And to him, it's like this huge detriment. It's like, I want to be a superhero, but everything I fight, like, just does not last for more than 1 second in one punch.
So an accidental hero.
Very much an accidental hero, although, like, if you read the story later on, it's almost the entire organization of superheroes kind of grew up around him, or because of him, but entirely accidentally. He doesn't even realize it at all.
Okay.
And even in the superhero kind of community, he's actually one of the lowest rated superheroes because he failed the written test.
That's cute.
He super passes all the regular tests. Like, he's lifting like super hot large weights. He's like sprinting faster than everybody else, and he's just super strong in all those other aspects. Then he gets to the written test and completely fails it. And as a result of failing the written test, he's like the lowest ranked hero, but he's like the strongest hero of all. So, but what ended up happening was that there was the mangaka who did a show called I Shield 21, which is actually about American football. And I know our audience can't see this here at all, but my mom was taking a note, and then when I told her that this is about American football, she gave me this like double take almost at me.
What?
Yeah. And to be honest, it's very good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But they don't really understand American football.
But apparently a bunch of high schools in Japan apparently play it, according to this manga. A bunch of schools in Japan apparently play it, and not only play it professionally for their schools, because remember, if you're in a club in Japan, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
But like, they have entire tournaments about it. They have actual full like plays and strategies about it. Like, so as an example here, I Shield 21 is about this kid who is this like super kind of meek kid that gets bullied all the time. But one of his indelible sort of traits here, though, is that because every day he's getting bullied, he's forced to go get, food for everybody else.
Yeah.
The bullies who are bullying him. He's got to get to the lunch line in order to be able to get there quickly. And he's learned how to kind of run really quickly and cut in and around other things to get to where he needs to get to really easily. She's the perfect running back, but just doesn't know it.
It's actually a cute storyline.
And then what ends up happening here is that he doesn't necessarily want to join the football team, but eventually does want to join the football team because he thinks it's going to make him more manlier.
Uh-huh.
And the football team's only got like 2 people on the team. It's got a quarterback and a defensive line. 1 guy. And they basically bully everybody else into being a part of the club when they need to go play something. But they can't. they don't have enough members to really have a full proper team at all, so they can do very limited stuff.
Can't run very many plays if
No.
you're not practicing.
Precisely. So what ends up happening here is that his very good friend, his childhood friend, who's a year above him, doesn't want to see him in the football club because she's afraid he's going to get hurt, which is fair in most cases. So what they do is they put a helmet on him that's got an eye shield on it, but it's a tinted eye shield so you can't see his face at all. And basically the quarterback, who looks like the devil in a lot of cases, which is kind of the funny joke of him. His literal name is Saitama, which is also it sounds a lot like Satan in Japan.
Okay.
Basically, made a point of saying that, yeah, this guy is from America. He used to be in the NFL in a high school level. That's why this guy is so good. Building up this one other meeker character, and it's honestly very cute and very endearing. They eventually get a full football team going, and they do run legitimate plays, and there's legitimate football strategy there, and they reference a lot of American football, much the same way Kuroko no Basuke references a lot of Japanese. It references a lot of
American basketball. Michael Jordan.
Yep. Even in, but again, that goes to my kitchen sink syndrome. In that there's a lot of cool stuff in Japan, and they just try everything. I mean, I could just run through the gamut of all the great sports based stuff I've ever read. They have a beautiful one about tennis.
It's interesting because again it goes back to the whole thing of the anime that I watched was so much more about the people than it was about the events.
And I can give you a reason why. As an example here, if you look at Japanese superheroes versus American superheroes, if you look at Captain America has the super soldier formula, and he's got this one set of unique powers. If you even look at Superman's got speed, flight, eyes, durability, strength. He's got this very select set of powers, and they don't ever really expand. It's always the same collection of powers. And a lot of the stories in American stuff are about using your powers to do what you can. And it was an and there was an intentional desire, especially in the early days of American comics, to be the status quo, because that way somebody coming into the comic would know, oh, so this is Spider-Man. Spider-Man always does X, Y, and Z. So it was nothing new that you had to learn additional stuff about.
You already had the storyline.
Not only so much you had the storyline, but you already knew who Spider-Man was.
Okay.
And it was more about Spider-Man introducing to new and interesting villains and how he would get through that.
Okay.
And so you always wanted to keep kind of a status quo of your heroes, because you were meant to kind of reproduce them all the time, and you didn't want to constantly have your hero changing all the time, because you'd have to explain it all the time, and somebody coming in new to it would not understand, or somebody who came in 7 months later would not be like, well, wait a second, why does he do that now, or why does he have this? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But in Japanese comics, though, it's about your character getting past stuff. You have to make yourself
evolve.
You have to get yourself stronger, and you have to get yourself better in order to be able to fight what you're trying to fight.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a really weird example of that.
Okay.
I've always liked the fact that Pokemon, both the trainer and the Pokemon itself, level up.
Yes.
And it's earned.
And they evolve and get to a better state.
But nothing is just given to them.
Nope. You have to fight, and you have to earn to get to it, and you have to get better.
Right. And I've always liked that. And that sort of goes with what you're explaining right now. It feeds very much into that whole sort of idea.
Yeah. I mean, even if you look, if you even look at American video games versus Japanese video games, we can see a lot of American counterparts where the character stays pretty static throughout the entire thing, and kind of the story's about them going through the story. As we're in a Japanese kind of culture, the characters are the story, are the kind of the main focus of the story, and it's the story that revolves around. It's the story that revolves around the characters, not the characters that revolve around the story.
Okay.
So, but no, yeah, I can rattle off some great, again, just sports based here. Like, there's one called Baby Steps where a guy literally learns how to play tennis through notes.
Oh.
So what he does is that he takes very, very detailed notes, like such great notes that other people could take his notes, copy them, and will be able to understand exactly what's going on in a class. He did that for tennis, and what he figured out was that he's got really good eyesight and he has really good control. So while a lot of other tennis players might have like specialty sort of shots or trick shots or something like that, what he has is he has really good control.
Yeah, so he's got good placement as a result.
Yeah, so what he does is when he plays tennis here, he's able to divide the entire tennis court into like grids and aim for smaller spots of those grids on the tennis court to move his opponent around. And then he also eventually, throughout the entire game, will eventually take enough notes that he realizes when a person does X, Y, and Z, they're going to do this shot. Like if their arm's a little bit lower, they're going to do a slice, or they're going to do an overhand spin on to make it to make the ball jump at me or slice at it,
or drop it.
Yeah, or if they lean their body in a certain way, they're going to do like a slicing serve or something.
Yeah.
So he's able to kind of like read what's going on, but take the notes on it to eventually figure it out. And he, in and of himself, there's a little bit of a romance in there, but it's taken all very like realistic.
Okay.
One of my favorite Japanese manga is actually running for over I think it's now over 1,100 chapters. Is a Japanese comic called Hajime no Impo, which is a boxing anime, the most realistic boxing anime I've ever read.
Okay, so let's break this down though. You said 1,100 chapters. That means it's been running for like 20 plus years.
Yes, it started.
That's amazing.
Started, I believe, if it's up to I think 12. It's over 1,000 chapters. I think it's up to like. I think we're in the 1,200 range. 1,200 range now. And again, if you think about it, like 100 chapters is basically
2 years.
Is 2 years.
Yeah.
He's been doing it since, if memory serves me, like 1995 is when he started it.
Wow. That's impressive.
Again, if you look at some long-running series, they're kind of like that. Doraemon is, or here's another great example. There's a TV series and manga called here in the West it's called Detective Conan. I can't remember what it's called in Japanese right now, but it's not known as it's called Detective Conan in Japanese, Here in America it's called Case Closed. Okay. It's basically the story is that it was this like teenager kind of detective guy is like really good at solving crimes and being like a Sherlock Holmes kind of guy. He accidentally runs afoul of this evil organization that gives him a secret medicine that's supposed to in theory kill him, but actually turns him into a little kid. So now as a little kid he's still doing like the Sherlock Holmes sort of thing, but nobody trusts him because he's like a 7-year-old, 8-year-old little kid.
Might give you access though. People slip up and say things they shouldn't in front of you because they don't think you're
that gets taken advantage of very frequently. And often what he'll do is he'll dart somebody up and knock him out, but then he'll have like he has like a little bow tie that when he speaks into it, it'll match the voice of what they're saying. So they might be like kind of conked out and like just kind of slumped over, but they're talking still, and then that person's being like the person that solved the crime here instead of a little kid. Because the concern is that if the little kid you figured out was him, that these evil bad guys would come back after him again.
Plus, he'd lose the advantage.
Yeah, then he'd lose a lot of the advantage as well of being a little kid and being able to be childish, but still still learn a lot of this information that other people wouldn't think about it. It's also run for about 1,500 chapters. And the TV series is in the, I think it's close to 700 to 800 range.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, One Piece is in that general ballpark as well. But no, yeah, you were asking me before about a golden era of manga.
Yeah.
I would wager probably for the modern version of the manga here was probably the 1998 through 2012, 2013.
Okay.
Because that would have been the era of the big three, which again was Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece. This collection of these shows doing this, these three manga here that basically just dominated the scene in both Japanese animation and the manga. Lots of video games, extra stories, all sorts of stuff based off of it. And then eventually what ended up happening was that Bleach actually ended up getting canceled because of low ratings.
Oh, really? Because I know I heard quite a bit about Bleach and thought it was quite popular.
I love it because I love it mostly because of its art look and direction. I find I kind of like the world as well. I thought the world was a very unique world. But what it would tend to do is it would create a lot of characters, and you would always be meandering on these other characters and not on the main character and the main plot.
Well, Game of Thrones does that very successfully.
Yeah, but when I say meandering on it, like, you might have like the main title character Ichigo appear for like 3 or 4 chapters within a year.
Oh, well, that makes it hard to,
and it makes it hard to kind of continue to follow along with it because he might be there for like 10, 12 chapters on there, but then you spend a lot of additional other time, 4 or 5 chapters with these other characters, and then another 4 or 5 chapters on another fight, and then another fight, and all these other fights happening, and then he might suddenly just show up, and he's really cool and fun and everything, but then it's all these other characters he's got to kind of fight through, and it's like by the time it ended, it had too many characters. Naruto eventually just ended because the artist literally ran his course with his comic. Like, he just like, this is the ending, and it's done. And it ended at 701 chapters. One Piece is still going, and I don't think it ever intends to end. One Piece is the notion here that there was a pirate called Gold the Roger, who was the king of all the pirates, and he got captured by the Marine military, which is basically kind of the world police. This is a world in which like 80% of the world is covered in water, and there's literally islands that are kind of like dot the world like a polka dot dress. They're everywhere.
Okay, so it makes sense that a Japanese comic would pick up that though, because Japan is a series of islands.
Is very much a series of islands. Agreed. And every island's got a weird little thing about it. Every island's weird. But basically, this one pirate, this king of the pirates, got captured, and when he was getting executed, he said, they asked him, "Do you have any last words?" He's like, "Yes, I hid all of my gold in one piece." So he basically told everybody, "Hey, I hid all my gold everywhere. You have to go find it."
Yeah.
And started this age of pirates because everyone wanted to be a pirate to find this golden treasure.
Yeah.
Now, in the series, pirates are not so much pirates in the sense that, like, they plunder other people and then destroy land and all this other stuff. In that world, like, pirates are just, like, privateers, realistically.
Well, and actually in the real world,
they were privateers.
They were privateers.
Yeah.
I mean, they were investors. I mean, they were funded by investors, and they were adventurers, and and they didn't exist for the sole purpose of plundering. They did, rape and pillage the New World, but and any other world they came across.
Yeah,
but that wasn't the intent. It was really a financial.
Yeah, it was really a financial venture, and the intent was always to be finding like you might. Like, if you wanted to be a nefarious pirate, you could be a nefarious pirate and plunder and all that other stuff. But a lot of times, if you were a privateer, you were just a person who got hired to take one shipment from one place to another. And if you happen along the way and cross another person that might come and attack you, you would obviously have to defend yourself, or you might say, "Oh, hey, there's a bounty over there. Let's go take care of that."
Or read about Sir Francis Drake or Walter Raleigh sometime.
So One Piece is a lot like that, although, like, the intention is that, like, it's supposed to be, there are good pirates and bad pirates. There are some pirates that are, like, give other pirates a bad name, and then there's good pirates that are obviously doing good. this is such a long-running comic that after reading 200 chapters of it, I had to stop because I didn't enjoy it.
Okay, well, fair enough.
But then, mind you, that's still about 4 years worth of material that I was reading before I finally realized I didn't enjoy it. And that's going to be true of a lot of comics. Some people really enjoy some stuff, and other people don't.
So what am I reading?
So I've got you, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I got you 7 series.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And now, mind you, like a lot of these series, you're not reading the entire volumes of it here.
Okay.
If you were to read Full Metal Alchemist, which is one of the comics here, they're about 40 to 50 pages. The first one, though, is 60 pages. Keep in mind, the first chapter is
I have heard about Heavy Metal Alchemist.
Full Metal Alchemist.
Full Metal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Full Metal Alchemist is a monthly series.
Okay.
So it comes out in a monthly magazine anthology that, and every chapter is about 40 to 45 pages long.
Okay.
And they're usually a lot more detailed because they have a whole lot more time to spend on it. Yeah. But the first chapters of most series are usually about an extra 15 pages long. Okay. So if you were like a weekly series, you might have a 40-page long starter chapter, which helps you kind of build the world and kind of set
up your characters.
Precisely.
Yeah.
In this case, the first chapter I think is like 60 pages.
Okay.
So
I'm game.
So there's Full Metal Alchemist. You have the next series I recommend that we're going to do here is called Death Note. It's the series I recommend to anybody who wants to get into Japanese animation.
Okay.
Because after just watching either the first 2 episodes of the anime or reading the first two chapters of the comic, you immediately know whether this is basically what the greatest thing about Japanese animation is that it's stories that you couldn't tell in anywhere else because Japan was willing to give anything a shot and try. Like, this is a show.
You're talking to a woman with a flirkin on her desk.
That's true. But again, I mean, but this is a show like you would never see in America because nobody would ever try to like thought process this out.
Okay. Well, you're forgetting that I grew up in the age of my mother, the car.
That's true.
And we had Night. What was that? The one that David Hasselhoff one with the talking car.
So, Death Note I'll preface for you here is basically about a story about a kid who finds a notebook where if you know the person's name and you know their face, if you write their name in the notebook, they'll die of a heart attack in like 40 seconds.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So that's the premise of the story.
Hence the term Death Note.
No, yeah. I'm not going to spoil anything else of it here because, again, this is one of those shows I don't like to tell people about, but I basically point them to Netflix and I say, you watch the first 2 episodes of this. If you're not hooked on it, then Japanese animation is not for you.
Okay, fair enough.
But if you're interested in it at the end of the day, then this is one of the wonderful parts of Japanese animation that gets to tell you unique and interesting stories and cool, interesting topics that you wouldn't see anywhere else. Because, again, this one does a very good moral tale at the end of the day.
Okay.
The next one we have here is you're going to read the chapters that are covered in the episode you watched of Kuroko no Basuke.
Okay.
And so this is the chapters in which Amane goes into the zone.
Yeah.
And
I'm curious as to how that looks on paper because that was very vivid.
It's very vivid in the
anime.
In the anime, it'll be a little bit different here.
Okay.
The next one I'm going to have you watch is a very beautiful little shoujo series done by a beautiful team called Clamp. It's called Card Captor Sakura. Sakura is a 4th grader, elementary school 4th grader, who opens up a book and accidentally releases all these magical cards from it. And she's tasked with recollecting all the cards. And now all the cards become like different symbols of like the wind and like other kind of things that she has to kind of defeat and capture again.
Okay.
Thus, Card Captor. It's a very beautifully animated series. It's basically what a shoujo series would look like.
Okay.
So that's an example of this.
So for girls.
For girls, very much. The next one I'm going to have you read is called Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-kun. This is going to be your example of a comedy / 4 yonkama sort of series. Because the entire each chapter is about 15 pages long, but they're told in this 4-panel sort of style.
Okay.
So that's why I wanted to give you an example of this, and there's a couple of chapters of this. The next one here is called Shokugeki no Soma, which is basically in American translated to Food Wars.
Okay. Is this like Hunger Games?
No, it's like Iron Chef.
Oh, okay.
So I picked out, and mind you, everything they do on here, they like the person's blog. There's people who blog out the actual recipes. You could literally make this at home.
That's interesting. I mean, so I love the way you curate things, because I've really enjoyed, like the Star Trek as an example, episodes that you chose. So I love the way you curate things, because there's a little slice of everything in it. I would have never suspected that you could have a graphic novel, basically, or graphic chapter on Food Wars, on cooking.
Well, there's a very other popular one that I couldn't find chapters for at all, unfortunately, where they bake bread.
I like baking bread.
Yeah, I believe it's called Yakutake Japan. The kid, the manga here for Yakutake Japan, the basic premise is that this kid has unusually warm hands. They call solar hands. The intention of it, though, is that the benefit of it is that when he plays with the bread and with all the yeast, he actually makes the yeast activate quicker.
Yeah,
so he can do unique things with bread that other people can't do, because he can make the bread yeast activate quicker, and thus he can do other stuff with it. And his intention is that he makes bread in order to find, because bread in Japan is called pan, P-A-N.
Okay.
And they have like French bread, and they have like all these other type of breads throughout the world that kind of signify that kind of that area's bread. He wants to make Japan. He wants to make Japanese. He wants to make
Japanese bread. Yeah.
He wants to make a bread that symbolizes Japan.
Oh.
Thus, Japan. See how they like puns?
Yeah, that's cute.
So, and the very last series I'm going to get you is called Bokutachi wa Benkonyo ga Denki Nai. And then that's a giant mouthful. In English, it's basically translated to "We never learn."
Oh, that conjures up all sorts of visions of people jumping off roofs. Okay.
That one is a school life series that has harem elements to it.
Oh.
So again, I got you. Again, I like to run the gamut and give you a lot of other stuff. I think part of the problem I've had, though, with this list is that it didn't get you really anything that's very Josei or seinen-y at all, with the exception of Death Note, which is probably about as seinen as this will get. Even like Full Metal Alchemist will have like elements of seinen into it, because it was aimed toward an older audience. And a lot of this is very much off of the Shonen Jump website.
Okay.
And just my taste usually run toward shonen stuff at the end of the day.
But this sounds like a great cross section.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I got you a big list here of stuff. I got you links and everything. One of the nice things about Japanese comics in America is that there's a lot of websites where you can read it online. Part of the problem, though, is that it's not necessarily legal. Now, the stuff on the stuff on the Viz website, they're showing for free, which is why I chose some of those chapters, and some of these stuff here was because it was free and easy to get.
Okay.
Other websites here are not necessarily kosher.
They're pirated.
They're pirated at the end of the day.
Okay.
All these stuff here are essentially available in America for free, or not. They're all available for purchase here in America. Excuse me.
In subscription services.
A lot of them under subscription services, and some of them no longer in print at all.
Okay.
And the ones that are not, that's one of the reasons why I got the ones that were not in print anymore. Like Cardcaptor Sakura is not in print anymore.
Okay.
So unless you want to go online and buy the volumes of it for like $12 a piece.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to find them otherwise. So
okay.
Everyone's got their own tolerance with pirating at the end of the day. I'm really of the opinion that if you have the ability to support it, you have to support it. because if you don't support it at the end of the day, people don't get paid to do it still.
Oh, I give money to Wikipedia every year.
I give money to Wikipedia. It's why I still give money to Crunchyroll at the end of the day. It's why I still give money to Netflix, even though I don't watch as nearly enough Netflix as I really want to. You got to remember that, like, if you, it's also the same reason why everybody should buy a copy of their local paper. Because good reporting comes from your local paper, and at the end of the day, if they don't have money at the end of the day to be sustainable at the end of the day, they're not going to be doing the reporting that's actually going to be useful to people.
Well, you're going to lose local reporting altogether.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, that's unfortunately where I think things are going.
Yeah, and websites like Crunchyroll and Viz.com here, which is the arm of the Jump, essentially at this point here, when they were here in the West, you would just have the volumes of it, and you would, in some cases, I waited literally 3 years for a next volume of something.
Oh, wow.
Because it took that long for them to license it.
Yeah.
But again, Hellsing's not that great of a show, despite what everyone thinks. But if you have, I always recommend, if you have the opportunity to support it, don't pirate it if you can avoid it. In this case here, like, some of the stuff I have links to are on pirate websites here. There's a billion ads all across the page, but none of that money will ever go back to the original artist.
But if I like it, I can subscribe to it.
Yes. Or to Viz, yes. The other stuff here, less so. Okay. Because they're all pirated here.
Okay.
So, if you're not able to read them or watch them because of that, that's okay. Keep in mind, sometimes these pirated websites do show stuff on there that never gets licensed in America.
Okay.
There's this legal gray zone where if it's not licensed in America, it's okay to... There's no other way to receive it, so this is the only way to get it. So there's a kind of a legal gray zone that's in there.
Your brother took advantage of that legal gray zone when he was in Cambodia and downloaded all sorts of things that he was told he could legally do.
So, yeah. So, but I'll give everybody this list online, and so that way you can read it, and I'm trying to not give it any real details about any of this stuff here, so you can go into this cold. What I will tell you, though, is that all these shows all these comics have anime for them.
That'll be interesting, because I actually may want to watch, cause I have Crunchyroll, so I may go onto Crunchyroll and watch several of these after I read them.
Yeah, and again, that might be a whole nother episode we do, is where you read you read these, and then we watch a couple of the episodes for that, and you can see where the differences lie and how they reproduced or how they did stuff differently even.
Yep.
So that might be something we can do at a later time here, but I think that'll be it for us here tonight. I think I've rambled on for nearly enough.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everybody for joining us once again here. Please visit our website, the nerdtutorialpodcast.com, and you can visit our Facebook page as well as facebook.com/nerdtutorial. Please rate us on iTunes and other platforms, because rating us well does help us out quite a bit here with getting notoriety and getting people to also listen to us here as well. And then if you have any questions, comments, critiques, or ideas for future topics, please feel free to visit me at nerd_tutorial on Twitter and leave me a message, and I'll be more than happy to start chatting back with you here. But until then, happy reading for these great manga here, and we'll see you again next time.
Bye.